All right, so we are ready to go. We're going to talk with Holly Ganz, who's the Chief Science Officer at AnimalBiome. She's going to talk about KittyBiome, learnings from a Cat-izen science project. Holly Ganz is the Chief Science Officer and co-founder of AnimalBiome, a biotech company that provides microbiome assessments and oral fecal transplant capsules to restore key beneficial microbes in cats and dogs. Holly received her PhD from the University of California, Davis, and was a postdoctoral scholar at UC Berkeley. Her efforts to translate academic research into solutions for companion animals began 5 years ago when she launched KittyBiome, a citizen science project, which revealed that imbalances in the gut microbiome are common in pet cats and that there is a pressing need for better approaches to maintain and restore gut health. After learning about the medical merry-go-round for cats with chronic gastrointestinal issues from participants in the KittyBiome project, she started AnimalBiome in order to help develop new solutions to help these kitties. Holly, are you out there? You need to unmute yourself, I think. Yep. Here. Oops, sorry, I just unmuted you. Here we go. Now, Holly, yep, Holly, you out there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, perfect. We have your screen,
yay.
We have your voice. Yep, excellent.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm Holly, and thank you, Stacy, for including me today and for the nice introduction. So apologies for the dog photo on the prior slide. I'll have to fix that. So today I wanted to talk to you guys about KittyBiome, which is a citizen science project that I started in 2015. So now it's almost 6 years ago. As a researcher at UC Davis, I did it in collaboration with Jonathan Eisen. And we did it partly just to do a project to engage people in science on the microbiome. And because people don't care about science and they won't help support, federal efforts to fund it if we don't engage them in it and share what the findings are if we sit in the ivory tower and don't communicate. So Jonathan and I had funding from the Sloan Foundation for science communication. And we thought, what better way to communicate with people about the importance of the microbiome than to look at the microbiome of cats, pet cats in particular, but also we included shelter cats too. As you probably would not be surprised to learn, it's hard to get funding to do a project like this. So we actually took it to Kickstarter in order to crowdfund it. I had tried several UC Davis funding sources and been unsuccessful. So I was like, I'm going to make this happen. And so we went to Kickstarter and we got our friends and family to kick us off, but then ultimately we were able to get some press, and that helped us to reach people who are just passionate about cats and wanted to help support research to advance the understanding of cat health. And that allowed us to raise about $30,000 to start the project. So what is the microbiome? You probably already know this, but just to give a sort of quick overview, both us and our cats are covered in microbes, and these microbes provide important functions for our bodies to help provide all of the things that they do. So it's not just digestion, but of course the GI tract is full of microorganisms. So it's bacteria, fungi, viruses, and other tiny things that live inside the cat, and they help with digestion, but also immunity, regulation of metabolism, kidney health, blood sugar. There's a skin-gut axis, there's the gut-brain axis, or the more we learn about this, the more we realize how important this system is to overall health. And prior to about 10 or 15 years ago, we didn't really have the tools to study it. We needed sort of contemporary genetics approaches to characterize these microorganisms because many of them can't be cultivated using sort of traditional microbiology techniques. So for KittyBiome, what we did was we asked people to collect a poop sample and send it back to us. So we, sort of had to explain that they should, collect it from the litter box, but try to could take a sample from an uncontaminated section and then send us a little bit of poop in the mail. And although my friends were convinced that I would get bags of poop sent to me in the mail, actually people were very, very good and I didn't receive any bags of poop. I received poop samples in sample tubes that had been properly collected. And it wasn't a problem to ask people to collect poop samples because the people who wanted to support this kind of science had a lot of experience with cleaning the litter box and taking care of their cats. And in fact, they were very observant about the fecal consistency of their cat's poop. So they would even send me photos, probably more information than you would ever want. But this was actually really fantastic. So I found people were really engaged. And of course, it did help to provide them with really clear instructions. So if you want to engage the public in doing science for you, then you need to communicate with them clearly, which is, of course, one of the big aims of the study was really about science communication, which is a really challenging thing. I have to say that I've been doing it for years, and I feel like I'm constantly learning new and better ways to try and communicate about things with people. It's a constant learning. I have to say we got so many fecal photos from our participants that I was able to actually build a fecal scoring chart all with KittyBiome participant photos, which is really great. We did also make some videos that we put on YouTube to help share techniques for how to collect these samples. Videos definitely help as well. And at the time, I think I used a type form survey, something that's very, anyone can subscribe to that service. There's lots of options now. You can use Google Forms and others. I asked people to fill out a detailed questionnaire and just give us some basic information about their age, the breed, the source of where they got their cat, their health, some diet information, which ended up being sort of the messiest part of the data set. And because we were really thinking about how lifestyle, like how much time you spend indoors or outdoors, or can affect the microbiome for people, we asked those questions as well for people with cats. So in the first year of the study, we obtained samples from 318 cats. 183 of them were pet cats. And then because actually several of us in the project were very involved with our local animal shelters and in acting as fosters for local rescues, we also were able to obtain samples from 115 shelter cats, I would say principally from the Berkeley Animal Care Services shelter, and also from about 20 feral cats. And one of the things we were really interested in was actually how feral cats might differ from pet cats in terms of their microbiome. There's been a lot of interest in the human space in how more traditional lifestyles might, how people who live more traditional lifestyles might have differences in their microbiome compared to sort of the Western lifestyle. And so we thought we might be able to look at that with feral cats. It did end up being complicated because, well, if the feral cats are regularly fed a kibble diet, it's still interesting to look at, but we need to sort of know that. I think I naively thought, oh, they were just living on, mice and rats and things like that. Also, I had early interesting data about feral cats that suggested that they had a greater diversity of the microbiome in terms of gut bacteria. But when we got more samples, most of the samples we were able to get came from very young feral cats, and their microbiomes weren't as diverse as I had found with the early, more adult cats. When we asked people where they got their pet cats from, 60% said they got them from their local animal shelter, 19% were strays, and then about 19% were purebred cats. And surprisingly, well, maybe not, I was surprised to find that there were a lot of Bengal cats. We did have samples sent in from 32 states in the US and 12 countries. Many of the cats in the study were reported to have a health condition. The average number of cats in a household was 2.5. 73% of them lived indoors, and 25% were able to go indoors and outdoors. And then there were 3% who were outdoor living cats. We found that it was actually hard for people to get samples from cats who live outdoors. As you can imagine, people didn't know where they were going poop. And we really needed to have a fresh fecal sample in order to be able to compare it with the other cat samples. 25% of the cats in the study had taken antibiotics in the prior year, which is something that can have a big effect on the microbiome, and so we were interested in that. 1 out of 6 cats in the study live with a dog. We also had a big, broad age range. So the average age was about 8 years. And we had everything from kittens up to a 22-year-old cat as the oldest one in the study. There were 17 breeds represented, but the vast majority of them were of mixed breeds, and given that they were shelter cats. So one of the questions that we thought might be fun from a sort of community engagement perspective was to look at some behavioral questions. So we asked questions around anxiety, stress, and depression. I have to say this is an area where I think our questionnaire could use improvement. It's not easy to ask these kinds of questions properly and to get usable data. But nonetheless, it was still interesting to see what people's perceptions were. We found that 22% of the participants in the study reported, and this is just of the pet cats, not including the shelter cats, 22% reported that their cats showed signs of anxiety, stress, or depression. I did try to get samples from Grumpy Cat, but his pet parent wasn't interested in contributing. But we nonetheless were able to look at the participants' results of the microbiome and compare it to whether or not they had anxiety or depression reported. And this is just a graph. You don't really need to worry about what the axes are, but every dot represents a sample from an individual cat, and then they're colored as to whether or not they had anxiety, depression, or stress reported for them or not. And the main thing that you can see here is that the blue dots and the red dots are all on top of each other, which means that we didn't find any differences in their microbiome that correlated with whether or not they were reported to have these conditions. It doesn't mean that the microbiome doesn't affect behavior. It just meant that we didn't detect any signal here. Another question that we thought could be fun from sort of an engagement perspective was to ask if the diet that was being fed to the pet cats mattered. So we asked, does it matter if you feed your cat a paleo mouse diet? This is something similar to the approach that people are taking with humans, where they're sort of asking about different diets, like the paleo diet in humans and how that affects the gut microbiome. And obviously with cats, if they're being fed, if they're hunting for themselves, they may have a different microbiome than if they're being fed a commercial diet. The other thing that I hadn't really been as familiar with before I started talking to people about their pet cats was how popular raw and barf diets are in terms of this community. So these are really popular diets, and they may actually have a significant effect on the gut microbiome. And now there actually have been several studies subsequent to that do support that. So we found that the people who participated in this project, who fed their cats a raw diet, were very passionate about them, and in fact they backed the project, I think, because they wanted to see how the diet that they were feeding their cats might be benefiting the microbiome. 12% of the backers in the study fed their cats some raw food, which is slightly more than what's found in the general population. And although veterinarians have traditionally been conservative in their response to this this trend of the last 20 to 30 years in cat food and dog food, I think they're starting to recognize that some of the people who are feeding raw diets are some of the most informed and conscientious clients. So I think that things may be changing a little bit. I think traditionally veterinarians have been very conservative about this because of the risk for foodborne pathogens. But when you look at the microbiome, you do find actually that these diets, whether it's fresh, commercial fresh, raw, versus kibble, there are differences that we're detecting. Also, just wet versus dry. And so we know that diet does affect the gut microbiome, and that these different diets do have an effect. Then the question arises as to what is healthy, right? So we don't know really, like, what are the long-term health effects of having these differences in the microbiome, and so we need long-term studies to really understand that. One thing that we found with studying pet cats on different diets is that if they had a chronic health condition reported, then that may be a larger signal than the diet that they're on, and it can be hard to separate those effects. Also, if people are feeding a regular probiotic supplement to their cat, then that's going to influence the signal that we get from the gut microbiome. So in general, looking at the effects of diet, it's easiest to do that if you do a feeding trial. And these kinds of studies can be done with pets in homes, but ideally they need to be carefully screened for health. So if you're trying to look at effects on healthy cats, then they need to be screened to make sure they don't have any health conditions. Or if you're trying to address like a chronic GI condition, you should screen them for that carefully and make sure they don't have, kidney disease or something else that's going to also affect the microbiome. And but you can do this with pets in homes. You just need to really carefully screen them in advance and to include controls in the study. Another question that we thought would be interesting is whether or not the microbiomes of cats who are more active or athletic cats differ from couch potato cats. This is a big topic in human health. Obesity, exercise and obesity have been shown to affect the microbiome of people and mice. And there are many studies on this. Of course, it's complicated because the microbiome is a complex system. But they found basically different groups of bacteria are associated with obesity in people. And when they do fecal transplants in mice, they're able to actually take, I think I didn't include that slide, but that you can take a lean mouse, feed it the microbiome from an obese mouse, and that mouse can actually become obese as a result of that. So what about cats? So we know that something like 59% of pet cats are either overweight or obese. I thought for this study that it would be fun to calculate a body mass index for pet cats and have people measure the length and girth of their cats in addition to scoring body condition. And I have to say people were very game. They really tried their best, but unless they're a health professional, they found it very challenging. And it seems like cats in general are made of elastic when they're alert. And so you can get very different measurements depending on how much they're stretching or crouching in response to fear because you've taken a tape measure to them. So in the end, these measurements weren't so useful. I had in the past done this kind of work because I was working with large cats like cheetahs, where when we would examine them, they would be sedated, and it was easy to get these kinds of measurements. So in the end, we relied more on body condition scoring, which while I'd say that people with pet cats maybe aren't as good at scoring this as a veterinarian would be, you can teach them, and I think having charts like this are helpful. So what we found was that many of the cats in the study had a chronic health condition, including obesity. About 60% of the backers reported at least one medical condition. And then when we look at obesity, we found that cats that were overweight or obese had less diversity of bacteria in their gut microbiome compared to healthy cats. So that's what these are showing, sort of diversity and richness are different ways of looking at the number of different kinds of bacteria that are found living in the cat as based on these fecal samples that people submitted. So since starting the study with KittyBiome in 2015, I decided about a year and a half later to start a company. Really because people were asking me for help. Their cats had these chronic health conditions, and when I told them that the microbiome looked out of balance, they were like, what do I do to fix it? And initially I was like, I'm an academic, talk to your veterinarian, which I still do say. This wasn't really helpful for a lot of people. And typically I would say, well, if there's a really depleted microbiome, you probably should talk to your veterinarian about a fecal transplant, which a lot of vets don't offer, although this is changing. So I started a business to really help these people, and I called it AnimalBiome in late 2016. And since then, we've now built a larger database, and we have about 8,000. Actually, I think we're at about 10,000 samples now from pet cats and dogs. And so this is allowing us to really answer some of these questions with a much larger data set. And so, of course, we're getting a lot more, pulling out a lot more significant findings. And of course, one of the things that we are interested in is obesity as well as other health conditions. So one thing that was sort of a low-hanging fruit to look at was once we created a healthy reference set so that we could understand what should the healthy microbiome look like in pet cats. Then so what ranges should different kinds of bacteria be found in a pet cat? We were then able to sort of say, well, what groups of bacteria might be associated with certain health conditions. So a lot of veterinarians will tell you that they expect cats and dogs to have E. coli or Escherichia in their fecal material, and that's true. But without having a healthy database to compare things to, we didn't really know what's the normal level of E. coli that we should find in a fecal sample. And so because we have a really good database that we were able to build starting with KittyBiome, we could say, okay, cats that have more than 5% of their fecal sample coming back as E. coli have elevated levels. And when we then looked at what were the health conditions that were reported, we found that they were significantly more likely to have chronic digestive issues reported if they had elevated levels of Escherichia. In addition, they were also likely to have had prior antibiotic exposure. And this is sort of a telling thing. We found that they were more likely to have taken antibiotics in the past year and to be missing key beneficial gut bacteria. This is a graph just showing the bacterial diversity score, and you can see that it's highest with the healthy reference set. The cats that were scored as having a normal level of Escherichia while being somewhat depleted because they probably have something else going on, or they wouldn't be sending us a sample. Their bacterial diversity score is much higher than the group that is coming back as having a high Escherichia level, which is about 15% of the samples that we receive from pet cats who are having some kind of health condition. So AnimalBiome is working to help cats and dogs with these chronic health conditions that might be related to the gut microbiome as measured through fecal samples. So we use the same technology that I was using as an academic to assess microbiome composition. Then we enable fecal transplants both through veterinarians as well as they can be given orally to restore missing beneficial microbes that may have been lost from antibiotic exposure. And then we also, are working to use diet and probiotics, other supplements to help maintain gut health. We actually work a lot with shelters and rescues, and we offer wholesale discounts as well as regular donations. We work primarily with registered nonprofits. We are also a proud sponsor of Cat Town in Oakland, and one of the first cats who we worked with on a chronic GI condition was Marigold, who had ended up in the Oakland animal shelter because she had chronic diarrhea. Cat Town rescued her, and her foster actually failed because she was such a wonderful, outgoing cat. And when Tracy came to us, very early on, we were able to actually help Marigold recover some missing microbes that she needed in order for her gut to function properly. In addition, for the KittyBiome project, I'm looking for additional fecal or rectal samples from adult feral cats, so I can really get back to that question of, do feral cats who live outside and maintain that lifestyle differ in the diversity of gut bacteria compared to cats living indoor lifestyles. And this would be for an open science publication where we would be publishing an open access journal and publishing the data. And so it's not for any commercial gain. So let me know if you'd like to help. We have sample kits that are very easy to use. And I just want to thank you for taking your time on a Sunday to listen to me. Feel free to email me at team@animalbiome.com.
Super. Excellent. Thank you, Holly. Thank you very much. And we do have quite a few questions here. So I'm just going to go through them here quickly. So how did you collect breed info from participants? From their reported input, or did you somehow test for the breed?
Oh yeah, great question. No, it was just what was reported. I love, in the future, I'm really hoping to be able to combine the host genetics with the microbiome data, but right now we're just able to rely on what people reported.
Are there plans to study the gut relationship to the dental mouth health in cats?
Actually, I have started doing that in the past year. So, and we actually have a grant being reviewed to study stomatitis in cats and the microbiome with a veterinarian who's a specialist in dental health. So we definitely do have plans, and there will be, I think, opportunities to participate in the future. So let me know if you're interested, and I can put you on the list.
Do injectable antibiotics have the same effect as oral antibiotics on the microbiome?
This is a great question. I'm not aware of a study that has addressed this at this point. Though I think that most of the research, when they've looked at effects of antibiotics on the microbiome, have found an effect. I don't think we know the answer yet.
How do you think young kittens are affected into adulthood after being treated with antibiotics for things like URI?
I think that young kittens may be in a better position to recover if they're given the opportunity to get exposed to beneficial microbes. I think if they're living in a really sterile environment and they're not getting contact with soil or other cats, it can be harder. And so we have, including my own veterinarian, found some young cats are unable to, their stool just doesn't firm up properly after they wean. And it may be that they're missing microbes that other adult cats have to help sort of everything function right. We've also done some work with sort of orphan kittens. We know that the current formulas today don't have all of the right microbes yet, but that's something that we're certainly working towards helping with in the future. And that's sort of a big aim, is creating new microbial cocktails that are cat specific.
Awesome. We have a few more here. Do these microbiome adjustments, are they safe and helpful for kidney renal situations?
They are safe. I think that the one thing is, we often, when we look at microbiome composition, we often find that a lot of pets aren't getting enough fiber. With renal health, we have to be more cautious about adding, recommending additional fiber. So it's really important to know that. But for the fecal transplants, we've actually had a lot of reports that it is helpful. It's still something that we need to have better data on to be able to write up for a study.
For feral cat samples, could you accept samples taken during the spay-neuter surgery, during like a TNR surgery day?
Yeah, I think that's ideal. Otherwise, you're just not going to get the samples. And what I can say now, which with confidence, is that a rectal swab is as good as fecal. So, because it can be hard, there's not always fecal material to get. So initially, I really wanted fecal, but either fecal or rectal swab would be fantastic.
Any recommendations for best supplements for our foster cats?
For foster cats, so it depends on what. Yep. So I guess in general, I think that the probiotics on the market today are really there are lactobacillus and bifidobacteria and things that are better for young animals. I think we are concerned that if you give too high a concentration of them, then it may prevent them from having their own gut flora properly colonized. So I tend to prefer dietary approaches to support the native microbes. So feeding them, wet, fresh, raw diets that are high in protein, and making sure that they do have a little bit of fiber.
All right, got a couple more here. Someone has said, I've seen mostly amazing results switching to a quality raw diet. Will you continue to study the raw diet option?
Yes, and we are writing up a paper now on raw diet in dogs. I would really love to do one for cats. We are working on another fresh food study for cats, but I don't think it'll get published because it's for a pet food company. But I think with cats, actually, we're going to find even more exciting results than we do with dogs for the raw diet, and definitely it's something I'm very interested in.
Okay, and then have the findings been published in a peer-reviewed journal? And if maybe you can email us citations or something like that, they'd be interested to look at that.
Yeah, so we decided that we were going to add all of the data that we've gotten in the past 6 years together and not just publish with the first 300 samples that we have for KittyBiome. And so we actually will be submitting that for publication in the next month. So I can share it with you in a few months once it's out.
Sounds great. Are microbiome test kits something that our vets can get a hold of? Basically, the commercial aspect, i.e., our kitten had a long period of diarrhea that had no discernible indication in his stool samples, but maybe looking at his gut microbiome would help impart answers.
Yeah, so we have several hundred veterinarians working with us, and we're hoping to have more. So yeah, either way, if your veterinarian wants to contact us, we offer them a discount, or you can also purchase it directly through us. We offer 15-minute interpretation of the results. If you go through your vet, then you can get more detailed interpretations as well. So we recommend both ways.
Excellent. All right. So I think that is whoops, sorry, more questions. Would you speak to GI kitten? So they're asking about different kinds of brands of food, I think here. GI kitten, Royal Canin, or Hill's GI Biome. Do you know about those?
I do actually. Well, I know more about the Hill's GI Biome because they actually secretly sent us samples when they were developing that from cats. And we actually gave them, this is back in like 2017 where we were doing this Golden Poo Award, and we gave Hills a Golden Poo Award, which we didn't know we were doing because they used the personal email account. So I can say that actually we liked the microbiome composition of cats on the Hill GI Biome diet. And I know that it contains a diverse blend of beneficial fibers that support gut microbes. So I haven't had experience yet with the Royal Canin version. It might be just as good. I just don't have data on it yet.
Excellent. All right, and let's see here. Everybody is really excited. Some person's already just sent in her first sample this week, so she's excited to be part of this. But do you plan on giving information regards to worms present and other beneficial info for the person?
Yeah, so we actually we are actually doing parasites too. It's still sort of in beta testing. We haven't but if you want to send us samples, we can do them for free at this point. We are trying to sort of make sure that we are reliable in getting the parasite results, and we know that this would nicely complement the microbiome testing.
Awesome, excellent. And if someone wants to just feed a commercial diet, not raw, are there ones you recommend?
Yeah, typically we just recommend that it have a high amount of protein. So, and when with cats, of course, we at least, some wet food, because the dry food is hard on the kidneys.
Would you work with a kitten rescue for free, since kittens can have a copious amounts of diarrhea that can be detrimental?
We definitely do, and we, give lots of donations. As long as you're a registered nonprofit, reach out to us and we'll see where we are. Our funding comes and goes, and so it sort of depends on our ability. But I think 5 of us came from sort of the rescue world, and so it's very important to us to give back.
Is there an issue with feeding high protein from plants versus meat?
This is a question that there are some studies for humans on this. We've done some work with Wild Earth, who has a vegan dog food that's based on a yeast-based protein. I haven't done any work with cat food companies though on that. So I just don't know. But I think they're, in general, I just don't know for cats because they are different, right? But it seems like plant-based protein does support a diversity of gut bacteria that are thought to be beneficial, but it's less natural for cats, so we'd have to sort of think about it in the context of their history.
Do you happen to know of any resources on sort of how to feed a raw diet safely?
Yes, so there's a group on Facebook that I really like called Raw Feeding for IBD Kitties, and 2 of the moderators have a supplement, a food supplement company called Food for Life, where they basically teach you how to make your own raw diet, and then they have a powder that you add, sort of like Just Food for Dogs has something similar. So I think there's different options now, but they were the first one I was familiar with. So that you can choose what meat you use and how it's sourced, and just add a supplement that allows it to be a complete diet. I think they want a wealth of information for learning how to do this kind of transition. So I definitely recommend the Raw Feeding for IBD Kitties group.
Do you have any thoughts on hydrolyzed diets for cats with food sensitivities?
Yeah, so hydrolyzed diets do work. I think it's more published for dogs again. It seems there's such a bias in the literature. But I think if possible, if you can get them off of those diets through really repopulating and adding diversity to the gut microbiome, I think that most pets can get off those diets unless they have a really severe chronic health problem. But they are a useful tool.
What's considered a high amount of protein in food?
Yeah, this is a good question. So I would say ideally like 50%. Sometimes 40% is, I would say, would be the minimum.
Could you repeat that Facebook group again, that for the raw food diets?
Yeah, it's Raw Feeding for IBD Kitties.
Thank you. Excellent. I believe we've covered most of the questions. Thank you so much, Holly. This was like biome speed dating. I feel like we just whipped right through all those questions. So I really appreciate you for taking the time.
Yeah, and feel free to email if you want more detailed responses to any of these questions, or if you have others.
Excellent. And Holly's contact information is team@animalbiome.com. That's team@animalbiome.com. Thank you so much, Holly, for joining us. And I think we're going to do